Welcome to the Gut Girl Podcast. And we're back today with Ash Bott. I'm so excited to have you here again.
Hello again.
Hello. And for those that missed our first episode with Ash Bott, Ash is a clinical nutritionist specialising in gut and hormonal health. Ash is also the person that introduced me to the world of the microbiome. Thank God. It was only, this year that you helped me start to understand this whole world. And as we've talked about in the last episode, the rainforest that is the gut microbiome. So today we're thinking together more about the factors that impact the rainforest, and one of those is stress. So thinking about that, I guess we all know the feeling of having butterflies in the tummy. Most people would resonate, I think, with that. They would have had that at some point, maybe going to an exam or on a first date or something like that. But what I want to pick your brains about is what's happening. When you get butterflies in the tummy, what on earth is going on in your tummy to kind of experience a feeling like that? Yeah.
I just want to acknowledge, George, that stress is something that is, we know without a doubt, detrimental to our gut. And unfortunately, it's something that we can't avoid in our modern life. Mm-hmm. So we are constantly stimulated, and this causes our body to move into a sympathetic state. So I'm sure we've all heard of our fight or flight response. And from a gut perspective, essentially what's happening here is that all of the blood resources, energy is being redirected to your stress response or to your fight or flee response. So it's not really important for us to digest food or to do a poo when we're getting chased by a tiger, right?
No, not the priority.
No.
Yeah.
So fortunately, we're no longer getting chased by tigers, but our body still responds the same way to any sort of perceived threat. So this might be as little as a ping on your phone, getting a spicy email from your boss, or having a fight with your partner. And our body responds by, as I said, jumping into that fight or flight, your sympathetic nervous system, and redirecting those resources to your muscles, to your eyesight, to your lungs, so that you can run away from that particular stress response. Now, what happens here is, if we're talking in analogies, it's essentially your brain telling your gut to power down. It's like, hey, we're going to sort of switch you onto the generators in terms of electricity for the body, and I'm going to take over because I need these resources elsewhere, right? So what happens in this situation acutely, it means that there is a reduced blood flow to your intestines. Now, this can cause a sense of queasiness, and this might be perceived or felt as butterflies, because the smooth muscles in your gut are getting less oxygen, less resources, less blood, and so they're starting to contract.
That is fascinating.
Yeah, there is an added layer to that as well. So your brain actually also, just to sort of really make you feel it, it does actually send a neural signal down to your gut as well, and it causes almost like these little spasms. So when you're nervous, as you mentioned, you're going to an exam, or even if it's a date, even if it's positive stress, you can still feel this sense of butterflies, and that is your smooth muscle within your gut having these contractions. And what this then in turn affects is your gut motility. So this is the speed and the way in which food is passed through your intestines.
Okay.
So if we're under stress for a short period or for a long period, it can cause things like either constipation, because the motility is slowed down because there is a lack of resource and an inability to move those muscles to push the food and ultimately poo through.
Yeah.
Or it can be the opposite. These irregular contractions can cause you to experience diarrhea or looser stools. So, or this is known as stress-induced diarrhea.
Oh, okay. So it could be either extreme. You could sort of not be able to go at all, or be going way too much in response to a stress.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other thing as well, there's a few things going on. Stress does have quite a big impact on our digestive system. And we'll talk to the long term a little bit later, but ultimately we know how important our gut is in terms of supporting the rest of our body. So it can have more of a systemic effect as well. If we're just talking about the gut, it's motility mainly and also secretion. So there is a reduction in secretion. So these enzymes and juices that you need to break down and absorb all the goodness of your food. Again, that's something that doesn't seem so essential when you're getting chased by a bear, right?
Oh, okay.
So if that process isn't happening, then it's very, very difficult for you to break down food and to absorb those nutrients. So that can result in bloating. It can result in gas because these foods are being broken down, but they're not being digested. So they're sitting there and they're fermenting. The other thing as well is it can result in, over time, vitamin and mineral and even nutrient deficiencies because there's that inability to absorb all the nutrients from your food.
Oh, okay. So obviously we all know when there's moments of stress like that are particularly acute, like going on a date or doing a test or something. But I suppose I think about the people who go through stress for extended periods of time, chronic stress that's there for months or for years that someone has to deal with or they're holding that. I don't know what that does to the gut because you can't, not go to the toilet for years. So like there's ways that the body must kind of try and manage that. I don't know what that looks like, kind of chronic stress, how the gut's reacting to that. I don't.
Yeah, really good question. So I want to point out that stress ultimately is not the problem. It's how we respond and rebound from stress. So it's really important that we are able to flip over to that sympathetic state at times, if we are running from the tiger. But it's really important then that we are able to recalibrate and come back down to a rested state. So the problem being with most people living in a modern world, as I mentioned before, we're essentially constantly being stimulated. So we're sort of living in this constant state of stress, right? So we're not having those big variables in between stress and rest, stress and rest.
Okay.
So it should sort of look like a heart rate monitor. Your stress levels going up and down, up and down. But we're sort of sitting on this constant wave of stress, just like a little ripple. And so when our body is constantly exposed to that level of stress, those resources are always somewhat diverted to those sympathetic systems. So alertness, eyesight, musculoskeletal system, cardio health, lungs, that sort of thing, right? Because we're always sort of in this steady state, ready to run. And it means that our gut for a period of time, maybe like you mentioned, like for really extended periods of time, is under-resourced. And it's almost like you're trying to run your car on empty. And ultimately, when that happens, is your car breaks down, right? Often digestive symptoms. So as we already mentioned, the stress poos or the constipation, the bloating, the discomfort, the butterflies, they will be the first signs and symptoms that, yes, you are experiencing stress and this is affecting your digestive health.
Okay.
In time, that can have an effect on your microbiome, your microbial balance. So ultimately, we're talking about what are those factors that are going to affect particular species in your rainforest, right? Stress is a big one. Stress is the chemtrails that is killing the eagles, that is going to cause the overgrowth of snakes, which is going to completely disrupt your system, right? Now, as we mentioned in the first episode, perhaps those eagles are responsible for, when I say eagles, obviously I'm talking about a particular microbial community. Maybe they play a really key role in helping to support the production of your serotonin or your neurotransmitters. So,
yes. I wanted to ask you about that because I know we're talking about how the mind impacts the gut, but I suppose too there's this process of the gut talking then back to the mind. I didn't know until recently that there's a pathway in which your body has capacity for your gut sort of to talk back to your head.
Yeah, it's like the chicken or the egg, right?
Okay.
So like stress is obviously causing this unstable state and also affecting the balance of our gut. But then because our gut doesn't have the particular microbes because it's under-resourced from the stress, then it's unable to replenish your serotonin levels.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is it right? I heard this recently. Is it correct that sort of 90 or 95% of your serotonin is in the gut?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
wow.
right. So we now know that 90% of we're constantly finding out the capacity of the gut. So we now know that 90% of serotonin is manufactured within your gut. And we understand as well that there is a large percentage of dopamine that also is made within the gut. Majority of our hormones as well start within our gut. They're synthesized, they're processed, they're activated or deactivated within our gut. Our immune system is a massive one as well. So 70% of our immune system, most of our white blood cells that are responsible for sort of protecting us from incoming diseases or pathogens, they all start by being being built by particular bacteria within our gut.
Right.
Yeah. So I guess to bring it back to the effects of long-term stress on the gut, chronic stress, being in that sort of consistent state of stimulation, is it can very, very quickly feed into systemic issues. So you might start to feel depressed, low mood, sluggish, because you're not absorbing all the nutrients from your food. You're probably feeling really tired. You're probably feeling fatigued. Maybe you're not able to produce hormones, so you're having some issues with your cycle, immune system. You may feel like you're constantly run down or you're always getting a flu whenever it's around because your gut has been so affected and basically so restricted in its ability to maintain the balance of the ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose in a way, when I think about the rainforest and the idea of chronic stress and the impact that has on the rainforest, I almost think about it being like a forest on fire or something. That sort of these things are slowly getting killed off that you need in your forest. Is that a fair kind of visual? You mentioned that it's not absorbing nutrients in the sort of ways you'd want it to be, and I'm not sure if that, visual checks out or it's not quite that.
Yeah, that's such a good question because I think from a practitioner perspective, people are very, very eager to make practical changes, right? So to change their diet, to add supplements, maybe even potentially look at their sleep. And often they will get really frustrated when they don't see results.
Oh.
But the thing is, they are potentially not managing or addressing their stress. So it's almost like, to come back to your analogy, is that they might be adding in all of these new species to the rainforest to try and repopulate it, to try and repopulate their microbiome. But the stress is causing this constant forest fire. So it's very, very difficult for them to replenish and rebuild their lush rainforest because there is this constant factor that is basically undoing all of the good work of everything else.
Right. Yeah. I mean, important, I suppose, isn't it, to understand how many different ways you've got to kind of come at the gut. There's one supplement, is not going to do it, and not necessarily, depending on the person, maybe, reducing stress is not enough on its own either. But this is sort of, this conversation to me is just helping me understand more about the multifactorial, multidimensional approach that is so helpful to take when you're thinking about your gut. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes, that's right. So, and we obviously discussed it earlier today where you said the most helpful thing for you is essentially changing multiple different areas of your life. And that has had like a really slow, steady, sustainable impact on your gut health and sort of overall health as well. So really, really important to factor in all different areas that could be affecting your gut.
I suppose, one of the reasons that this episode is at the start of one of the first episodes in the podcast is because I get the sense, just from my personal experience, that, you can try all sorts of things for your gut, as I have over the years, but if your body is still really, under a lot of stress, it's hard for a lot of the other things to stick. That stress seems to override a lot of other efforts, you know. So it seems so important, the more I'm learning, to, you know, do what you can to keep your level of tension and stress down, to help the gut to do what it wants to do and needs to do to get better. Yeah.
You cannot heal if you are in a stress state. You must be in a rested state in order for your body to truly heal. And then that pertains specifically Pacific Ocean. And that's very true with your microbial community, with your gut microbiome as well. So when we flick over to that state of rest and digest, that's where our body does its best work. So coming back to that analogy at the beginning of all of the resources, the energy, the blood, whatever you want to call it, shifting away from your digestive system into those more operational parts of your body, in order to move that back into your digestive system so that it can have the capacity, in order for the brain to sort of turn the power back on down in your gut, you need to move into that parasympathetic state. You need to let your body know that it's okay to calm down. The secretions will start again. Your motility will be restored, and your gut, your microbial community, will then have the capacity to do what it needs to do to there may need to be some interventions in terms of, you know, we've caused some damage, so we're going to have to undo some stuff. We'll have to look at reducing some of those overgrowths and rebuilding that community that has been affected by the stress. And it's from there that we can really start to heal the gut.
Because you don't want to make all these efforts and then think that, you know, they're not worthwhile. Try all these different sort of food things or tests or supplements, and then be wondering, why isn't it working? And this could be one of the reasons why stuff is not as effective as you're wanting it to be.
Well, it's so interesting, George, because, and we've discussed this and I have experienced this as well, is that often people will go on holidays, or it will simply just be the weekend, and they'll find that it's really easy for them to do a poo, you know? Yeah. And then it's very obvious that the cause is most likely linked to stress. So my dad gave me some really great advice, and his name is Greg. I call him Regular Greg because I
can imagine why.
From as far, as long as I can remember, my dad has gone to the toilet every single morning. He will get up and he will go to the toilet. And it is astounding, right? Now, he's very healthy now in terms of his diet and lifestyle. Hasn't always been, but has always maintained a regular bowel movement.
Right.
Now, from when I was little, my dad was that dad that would sit on the toilet maybe for up to half an hour, and he would read the newspaper, right?
Winding down, is it?
Yeah.
To allow himself to go.
His body was in a relaxed state. So his body knew that he wasn't getting chased by a tiger, the gut was resourced, the motility was healthy, and he was able to do a poo. Right? So it's really, really important, just from that example alone, that you allow your body to be so relaxed and feel so safe that it's able to perform those functions of rest and digest. I think that's all I need to say.
No, I think that's the guts of it, you know, isn't it? That's really important to understand. If you're going to kind of go down this journey of trying to understand, work through gut issues, it's a bit of an unavoidable one. You know, you do need to think about in some way. It's, you know, where your stress is in the picture. And it may not be in the picture. There might be other stuff going on, but it could well be part of the picture. It does impact. You're not crazy for sort of just feeling like, oh, what's weird when I go on holiday.
Yeah.
I can suddenly go to the toilet and I'm like less inflamed or something, or everything feels
And it's important
better.
To be aware of those changes in behaviour as well, right?
Yeah.
To notice that when you do go away or when you're on holiday or you feel really relaxed, it's easy for you to go to the toilet. And then you can almost start to understand, and I hesitate to use the word diagnose, but you can almost start to make a really clear assessment as to what is helping or hindering your gut health. And when you take all of that information to a practitioner, it can be really helpful in terms of creating a treatment plan that's going to be super effective for you.
Right.
Yeah.
I suppose thinking about the impact of stress on the gut is important, and we're doing that today. But I also think that it's important, and from my own personal experience, stress was not the only thing at play. And so working on stress alone was not enough. And I think sometimes for people it's not the only factor. There's a bunch of other stuff going on with their gut that they need to understand.
Yeah, well, it's not just fire that affects the forest, right? There might be like introduced species, there might be logging. Yeah, so it's really important that we address all of the factors that may potentially help or hinder your gut. So I'm glad that we highlighted stress today, because I think that's something that people often overlook, or they don't understand the importance or the impact that it truly has on your gut and hindering your healing. There are essentially, and I'm excited to get a little bit deeper into this on our next episode, but as you've already mentioned, so we do have stress. Diet is a huge one, and that's sort of my specialty. Movement for sure, and sleep is a big one. Yeah, and they all sort of interconnect and have an effect on one another as well. I like to think of it as like the 4 pillars of the chair.
Right.
So if we look after our stress levels, our mental and emotional health, our sleep, we're having good quality sleep, our diet, and we're moving, then we've got 4 solid pillars of the chair. If you remove even one of those, your chair's going to get a little bit wobbly, right? Yeah.
Oh, okay. No, this is exciting. So I want to thank you again, Ash, for being on here today and talking about stress in the gut and the butterflies in the gut and what on earth that all means. And I can't wait to chat a bit more in episode 3.
See you then.
Yeah, see you then. That's a wrap for today's episode of the Gut Girl podcast. Thanks for listening. See you next time as we learn more real-world strategies for gut health, one bite at a time. Everything you've heard today is for educational and entertainment purposes only, and is not a substitute for professional medical or psychological care. While I am a registered psychologist, this podcast is not providing psychological services. Always seek medical advice from your qualified healthcare professional before making any changes to your diet, medications, or treatment plan. I do not necessarily endorse all the views and statements of podcast guests, and myself and the guests are not aware of your individual circumstances. Any advice given is general in nature.